Come join me in my creative space where we can paint, learn, and have a few laughs. So get comfy and let's get started. Welcome, Kat here. Today I'm going to be reviewing this Fabriano paper. It's new to me. It's called Fabriano 1264. It's a 4x8 pad. And it says on the website that it's 25% cotton paper. I paid $6.99 for this, which is very affordable. And I just thought I'd do a very, very simple little landscape to try out some different methods of painting. I didn't use salt because typically on this kind of paper, salt works extremely well because your paint sits on top of it rather than be absorbed. So I'm using some raw sienna to fill in this entire deer. As I said, this is just a very quick project to test out the different methods. So this is wet paint on dry paper, and I quite like the feel of it. It sits on top so I can work the paint, a little more than I could on cotton paper. I can push it around is what I mean. And then I'm trying a little bit of wet on wet over here with the cabin. So I'm using a little bit of the raw sienna and brown mixed together, very, very watery. And it kind of just sits there. But I am not using much pigment, so it's not the best judge. So when I do the sky, I'll be able to tell you more about that. And I'm adding shadow beneath the roof of the cabin so that you can tell it overhangs. All these tiny little details gives everything definition and some form. And now I'm trying to make it look like a log cabin by rounding out the edges a little bit. And despite the fact that the paper dries extremely quickly, I'm not getting any undesired lines or anything like that. So I'm wetting around the cabin, and this is the part where I'll see how the blue drops into the wet on wet, because it's a much larger space than the cabin was. A much larger area, excuse me. So I'm choosing the turquoise blue for the sky, and that turquoise tends to really spread very well. So we'll see how it behaves once I get it in here. Not bad. The edges are softening, and I'll have to soften it out with my brush, but that's pretty typical. It's kind of the way I put it on. And it's nice and smooth. You're not getting the bleeding that you might get on a cotton paper, but it's working just fine. And as I said, on the website, it says this is 25% cotton paper on the Fabriano website, but it does not say that on the cover. So it's 140 pound paper, so it's regular cold pressed paper, and it's performing quite well. So now, once again, I'm going in. This is drier paper, wet paint on dry paper. And I just want to see how now using a credit card, scratching some trees into it, how they'll hold up and how the paper will hold up. And so far, so good. There's no tearing, there's no pilling. It's working quite well. And on this cabin now, because I tried to make it look like a log cabin, I'm just doing some very simple lines going across. And I'm not being very careful because this is more about testing out the paper than anything. In fact, though, I am going to keep this and use this as a card. So it's a good size for that. It's like I said, a 4x8. So it's nice for landscapes, small landscapes. So my first brown was brown and raw sienna, and now I'm just using plain brown. And in the deer's ear, I'm using any kind of rosy color with a bit of that brown. The brown kind of makes it into a dusty rose, more natural looking. And I'm using burnt sienna and Payne's gray to make a black as I normally do. Just for the eyes and the nose. There's not a ton of detail because, as I said, it's just a quick landscape. But you know, give it enough attention that this won't go in your trash bin. You can frame it, give it as a little gift to somebody, or you can use it as a card, as I said. And with some burnt sienna and also some brown, I alternate. I am adding some shadows to the deer so that it gives it some form. So it doesn't just look flat. So the part that's farthest away from the sky is going to be the darkest. Just keep that in mind when you're trying to add shadows. So far the paint is not lifting back up, and there's hardly, I have not used a hairdryer to dry anything. It dries on its own. So I'm very impressed with that. Perhaps that is because there is 25% cotton. The paper is not buckling very much, and I wet that whole sky I put quite a bit of water on it. So far so good. I'm quite pleased with that. And here, like I said, I'm alternating between the burnt sienna and the brown. If you add different shades here and there, it just makes it look a little more realistic, and the gradation is more gentle, so you don't have raw sienna and then dark brown. That's a bit harsh. So the burnt sienna acts as like your mid-tone. So I mixed a gray with the Payne's gray and the burnt sienna, and I pre-wet these trees in the background, and I just want them to look like birch trees. They don't have to be very detailed, or because they're supposed to be in the background, and you just need to know that's what they are. I added a few branches there, but decided I'll do that at the end of the painting. So I'm just dropping in on the wet tree tiny little specks of the darker gray paint. So you can tell they're birch trees. And now with Hooker's green, I'm going to start adding some little tiny evergreen trees. And you can, if you're going to pay a lot of attention to this painting of yours, because I'm testing the paper, make these all different sizes. And of course, the closer the closer you are to them, the bigger they can be, or they could be just tiny trees. I just chose to do some pretty small trees. That they're newbies. They haven't been around a long time. They're not very old trees. And of course, I make them look like they're growing out of different parts of the ground, because they don't just grow in a straight line. They're sporadic. They grow sporadically. And then this one, I could have made a little bigger, but it does look like a little baby tree next to that deer, so I'm good with it. So I just tickle my brush around to make those branches. And in the back, right back there, I pre-wet the paper so that I can give the illusion of very soft, distant evergreen trees. There's no detail in them really. It's just a shape. And now on the other side of the lines that I painted, I'm trying to add a bit of color so they look a little more rounded. If this had been a bigger painting, I'd have a bit more success at doing that, but Either way, it could be a log cabin. And the darker brown is for the roof. Just giving that a little bit of definition so you can see it better. So overall, I'm so far so good. I'm pleased with this paper. And now I chose to do some trees with masking tape because in some papers, masking tape will rip your paper, and it did not. There was not one fleck of paper disturbed. So it took the masking tape very well. And underneath all the trees, I'm just putting a little bit of that turquoise so it looks like disturbed snow a little bit. Just to, like a little bit of shadow from where they're growing out of. Where the trees are growing out of. And once again, I'm doing the same thing as I did in the back, but keeping in mind these are much closer, so I am going to pay a little bit more attention to how I present them. So I did this painting very, very quickly, so I did not afford them the care that they deserved. But I think they turned out okay just the same. And there's another one. You wet and then you dab in some of that darker gray. And because of the paper, you may have to guide it to where you want to go. I always start at the side so that it gives the tree a little definition, and then I pull it outward. If it was an even bigger tree, I would add those little tiny lines and scores that you see in a birch tree. But they're a bit too small, so I didn't do that. Painting small can be a lot of fun because you can forego some of the detail and still make your painting quite nice. I think in hindsight, as I'm watching this right now, I would have put maybe a different color in the background. I just used that Payne's gray in the back there behind the cabin just so it looks far away. I chose that, but you can use any color you like and add any colors you like and add as many trees as you like. I would have added a big huge one right in front of the cabin, I think, kind of right opposite where my hand is now, where the deer is, right opposite the deer. So I pre-wet all the snowy area, and I'm just trying to make a few shadows and just to make it look like the snow has been disturbed a little bit. It's not completely flat. And I'm dropping in some dark color because I want to see if I can move it around, and I can. It's not staining the paper. I can work it, which I'm pleased with. Now, I used a darker green here. I used the Hooker's green, and then I added the Payne's gray. So I'm just adding another tree and some shadowing to the trees that I already had, because they looked a little bit pale to me. I'm using my Dr. P.H. Martin Bleed Proof White. You can use any white you have. This is what's handy on my desk. And I'm adding some snow just here and there. You don't have to do this step if you don't want. And of course, some of the snowflakes. And I have to do some manually because I don't have very much luck when I spray. Now look how flat that paper dried. I'm very impressed by that, and quite pleased. I will definitely be using this again. I added some branches in the background. As you can see, it's full now. And I'm quite pleased with this paper. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you give it a try. I hope you can get this paper. As I said, I paid $6.99 for this 30 sheets of 4x8-inch paper. I want to thank you for watching, and if you liked it, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you know every time I upload a new video. Happy watercoloring! Bye-bye!